Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, we'll be talking about how AI will transform financial management. And first, we're going to go through a couple of housekeeping items. So there's a Q&A interface on the lower left of your screen, and please use that to submit any questions to our presenters. During the course of the presentation, we're going to do our best to address those questions, but if we don't get to them, we'll follow up with you after. After the webinar is complete, we'll send you a copy of the presentation and recording, as well as follow-up emails after the event. And please don't forget to take our post-event survey, which you'll receive upon conclusion of this webinar. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to kick off with introductions, and then we'll go into our main content, which is 9 questions of an AI overview, the AI and the financial function, and then concerns and looking ahead. And if we have enough time, we'll get into Q&A with our panelists. So I'll kick things off. My name is Janet Wee. I'm a product marketing manager here at Sage Intacct, and I manage our product launches and customer campaigns. And I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves, starting with Eric.
Hey, thanks, Janet. My name is Eric Zonlicker. I'm Director of AI Product Strategy here at Sage Intacct, and I focus on our AI strategy and ultimately delivery of AI-powered features. Thanks. Glad to be here.
Thank you. David?
Hey guys, David, Director of Machine Learning here at Sage, and I'm responsible for the ML behind Sage Intelligent Time, if you ever used it, and work very closely with Eric, and I've been here at Sage for just over 2 years.
Thank you, and let's end with Sandy.
Thanks. I'm Sandy. I work in product marketing for Sage Intacct, and I'm focused on bringing our AI products to market. I'm really excited about the ability for AI to help finance teams elevate their work and free them from repetitive and mundane tasks.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So first, we're going to start with an overview of AI, kind of to get a little more context into what it is and what it can do. So my first question is actually for Eric. What is AI and why does it matter?
Yeah, so AI, or artificial intelligence, I would broadly define as the pursuit of creating computer systems that are able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence. So basically computers that are able to behave intelligently. You know, we see examples of AI all around us, right? So Alexa and Siri voice assistants, or Google Search, which uses AI to service better search results. Teslas use it in self-driving mode. Facebook uses it to show you relevant ads, and Netflix uses it to recommend shows that it thinks you'll like. And it matters because it can perform tasks for us humans that allows us to live better lives. You know, in that case of Google, AI is crunching millions of data points, and in less than a second gives us the information we need. In the case of self-driving cars, it's AI that watches the road and other dangers and gets us safely to where we need to go. Now, on that, the tech isn't perfect yet, but it's getting better every day. And some studies actually estimate it's already 10 times safer than humans. And in the finance setting, which is obviously relevant to us here at Sage Intacct, we're building a future where AI will automate manual, low-value processes. It will monitor transactions for accuracy so you can trust your financials. And it will synthesize information across your different systems to help you understand what the future might look like and how to best prepare for it. So to quote our CTO, Aaron Harris here, AI allows us to elevate the work of humans, that humans do to be more valuable, and lets humans focus on unique skills that AI will never be able to replicate. I really like that quote by Aaron. I definitely agree. So yeah, that's why it matters.
Great, thank you for that broad overview. I think it really helps put into context what AI is and how it can help the finance function. And to kind of get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty, David, what terminologies do we typically associate with AI?
Oh, I think this one's me again. I can take this one.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, artificial intelligence, right? It's really an umbrella term. So I already defined it just a few minutes ago. But under that broad sort of umbrella term of AI, you have different kinds of what I would call AI technologies. So these can be rule-based programs. It can be robotic process automation, or RPA. It can be what we would call like classical machine learning, and then finally deep learning. So if I just kind of give an overview of each of those, if you start with a rule-based program, it's one that follows a simple rule, such as if X, then do Y. So for example, it could perform a simple email filtering task, right? Like let's say we want to move an email to our spam folder. We could set up a rule that says if an email subject contains the word promotion or the phrase hurry with an exclamation point, move to the spam folder. And it's easy to tell that while this might work well in some cases, it won't work all the time. So if we move on to RPA, it's still a rule-based technology that relies on rules or code written by humans. But I would distinguish it from simple rule-based program because RPA programs can actually do more complex things. So for example, if we're kind of, so a couple examples, you could send data from one system to another when a certain action has occurred. Or they could be tasked to do something like open an email attachment, look at the contents. So if we want to improve our spam filter in this case using RPA, we could have the program open email attachments and look inside of them for other keywords that might indicate that an email is spam. You couldn't do that with a simple rule-based, X then Y thing. So that's where RPA is a little bit more powerful. And so while rule-based programs and RPA are under this AI umbrella, it's only when we move onto machine learning, which includes both classical machine learning and deep learning, that we begin to talk about the usage of algorithms that can learn from data to perform more complex tasks. So this is the more kind of exciting fields of AI. And within machine learning, you'll hear about supervised and unsupervised learning. So I just want to touch on this quickly. Supervised learning refers to algorithms that are trained to learn certain patterns in data. While unsupervised learning refers to algorithms that are not trained on any data. And a really nice feature of supervised machine learning approaches is that oftentimes humans themselves, through using software, for example, can provide feedback to the algorithm in a process that we call human in the loop. And so ensuring that humans are in the loop means that humans are able to have some control over how the algorithm performs, which often leads to improved comfort, confidence in the system, as well as ultimately better performance. So that's a really nice feature of supervised machine learning problems. And many are supervised. But if I just kind of go back to our email filtering example, a classic supervised machine learning algorithm called naive Bayes is what was first deployed to combat the problem of email spam back in the 90s. So rather than creating rules, we allow the machine learning algorithm to learn from the data and auto-classify emails as spam or not. And so the algorithm itself will begin to learn what sort of words and phrases are likely to be spam. And then finally, talking about deep learning, the latest advances in the field of AI and machine learning have come from deep learning, which is a branch of machine learning where artificial neural networks, which are inspired by the human brain, learn from really large amounts of data. And these artificial neural networks or deep learning algorithms are those that power things like facial recognition, voice assistants like Siri, speech translation systems like Google Translate. So in our email filtering example, deep learning could actually take a email in French and translate it to English and then run that through maybe a different like classic machine learning spam filtering example, and then determine if that's spam or not. So anyway, that was a lot, but hopefully that helps to clarify sort of what's under the umbrella term of AI and the varying abilities of each of those kind of technologies.
Great, thanks for getting us into that, Eric. I think what might be helpful now is to maybe take a step back and kind of look at the practical day-to-day use of AI. Sandy, do you think you could talk to us a little bit about the different examples we're seeing that AI is being used in our day-to-day?
Yes, of course. Many people still think that AI is some kind of science fiction that we see in the movies, but in reality, we use it every day without even thinking about it. I'll share just a few of the many examples that many of us are probably familiar with. Machine learning is used in many applications today, and Eric touched on some of these in his intro. It's used behind the scenes to filter spam in our email inboxes. It gives us driving directions and helps us avoid traffic. It makes recommendations for TV shows and movies based on what we've watched in the past. It's used in fraud detection, looking at our past purchase habits to identify unusual activity and then flag it. We also use conversational AI to communicate with machines without needing any specialized skills. So whether you're asking Alexa to turn off the lights, or asking Siri to dial a number or send a text for you, or interacting with a virtual assistant on a website for sales or customer support, conversational AI is behind it. We're also seeing AI applied to images. For instance, if you've got the latest smartphone that uses face detection to be able to turn on the phone or make purchases. And perhaps a usage that isn't as widely known, but I personally found this quite useful recently, was that I was able to take a picture of some tiles in a store, and then without knowing the brand or who made the tile, I was able to use Pinterest visual search to find that exact tile online. So helps us in our shopping. So AI is behind all that and much, much more. It's just part of our day-to-day, and we don't even really realize it or notice it. But it's also important to point out that while AI is doing some amazingly useful things for us, we're still in the early days, and there's still huge opportunity to create value in our everyday and work lives.
Great, thanks, Sandy. And let's dive a little bit more into what AI could look like in our work lives, and especially here at Sage Intacct. So maybe David, do you think you could talk to us a little bit about the role that multi-tenant cloud plays in AI?
Sure. Yeah. So it's probably first worth talking about the difference between a multi-tenant cloud solution and a single tenant cloud solution. And the best way to describe that is that multi-tenant solution, all customers, all users are interacting with a common instance of the software, and they all share from a big pool of computing resources. And that's what allows different users and different customers with different needs and performance and volume to scale elastically and grow and use those resources. Whereas a single tenant product really designs everything around one single rigid instance. And so this is what allows them to kind of scale with a larger pool of resources. And it's just overall a much more scalable and performant approach. And the other thing is that multi-tenant cloud really comes in when it comes to AI systems, in that more data typically means smarter systems. So I'll give you two concrete scenarios where this comes in. First, a multi-tenant architecture helps us solve what's called the cold start problem. So let's say you just started using Sage Intacct and we have very little data about your specific company. In a single tenant architecture, since an AI system is only as smart as the data it's based off of, we can train, it would only be, pretty infantile at the beginning, right? But if you're in a multi-tenant architecture, we can train models for the superset of all our customers and then fine tune the results to each particular company's needs, and then thus provide AI from day one. So, kind of like a more close to home example is, imagine the first time you tried to use Google Maps and you wanted to find how long it would take to go from point A to point B, and Google said, I have no idea how long it would take, right? If they were just using your history. But instead, they look at how long it takes all of the users that use Google Maps, and they can give you a pretty good estimate that it's going to take 1 hour and 43 minutes for you to make that drive based off of all the other customers in their multi-tenant architecture. The second scenario is being able to harness the collective activity, the collective transactions across millions of users and millions of customers. So, for example, suppose your business just started purchasing standing desks for your employees because many are working remotely now. You might not have made that purchase before in your system. It's brand new for you, but many others of our customers may have. And so if somehow you entered the price of that table as $10,000, we would, in a single tenant scenario, we wouldn't bat an eye at that. We would say, okay, well, there's this item and you pay $10,000 for it. But in a multi-tenant setup, we may have many other customers who bought tables, and we know that $10,000 is too much to be paying for that, and that's probably a mistake. So those are just two concrete examples, but there's lots and lots of other benefits for being in a multi-cloud architecture.
Great, thank you. So now that we've gotten a little more context into what AI is and what it can do for us, let's jump in a little bit more into the intersection between AI and the finance function. So first, we're going to kick it off with what sizes and types of businesses benefit from AI. And Sandy, do you think you could take this one?
Yes. There's a general perception that AI is this big, expensive luxury that only big companies can afford. But that's not actually true anymore. We're seeing what we call the democratization of AI, where these tools are accessible to everyone. Businesses of all sizes and types can use it and benefit from it. It's now embedded within many cloud-based software services, often at no additional cost to the customer. So small and medium businesses can automate their more routine tasks, and they can focus on the more complex challenges that humans are better at. We're also seeing it in a wide variety of applications across industries. For instance, a small bookshop can use predictive ordering to manage their restocking, or a small e-commerce company can use it to make recommendations to their customers on their website. In the travel industry, we see the use of virtual assistants a lot. And in the healthcare area, we're processing huge sets of data to detect changes in the human body that allow doctors to diagnose complex and rare conditions and create new drugs to treat those diseases. In the hospitality industry, we see experimentation of food delivery by drones or self-driving cars. And it has the huge potential to change the way restaurants think about inventory, customer marketing, and menu selection. There are many, many other examples that we could share, but hopefully this is enough to convey that companies of all sizes and all industries can really access and benefit from AI.
Thank you for that. And as far as what benefits AI brings to finance, Eric, do you think you could answer that for us?
Yeah, definitely. So here's Sage Intact. We've talked about the benefits that AI can bring to finance teams, and we've done so through these three pillars: continuous accounting, trust, and insight. So I just want to break each one down, and then I have some examples of each one as we'll step through this. But starting with the continuous accounting. So continuous accounting is all about getting data into the system in as real time as possible. So a lot of these are transactions like payments in, payments out, expense reports, timesheets, etc. Currently, finance teams, spend a lot of their time on these relatively low value and repetitive tasks. So automating as much of this as possible will save teams time and free them up to work on more high value tasks. Moving up to continuous trust, it's about using AI to continually monitor financial transactions for, incorrect, fraudulent, or anomalous entries. And there's a $40 billion industry in the US alone built around auditing financial statements so that investors and other stakeholders can trust the integrity of those statements. However, much like the financial close, this currently happens at snapshots in time. These audits happen monthly, quarterly, or annually. And so using AI to continuously verify transactions will improve accuracy and confidence in accounting statements. And then last year, moving on to continuous insights, just as the slide says, continuous insights is about knowing the unknowns. So maybe you want to know how many customers are going to churn next quarter, or maybe you want to know if you'll have enough cash flow in the coming months to invest in a certain piece of equipment or hire more team members. So this is also where AI can help. So moving through the deck, we'll talk about each of those with a product example that's actually in the Sage Intact solution. So so this is, I love doing timesheets, said no one ever, right? So if talking about the first one, continuous accounting, while it might seem unrealistic to do this continuously, at Sage Intact, we're making real progress for continuous accounting using machine learning. And we're starting with this process that's universally hated, filling in timesheets. So here's a screenshot of Sage Intelligent Time, which is an AI-powered time entry solution. We wanted to free service staff to focus on their clients. So our intelligent timesheets do the grunt work of combing through calendar, email, different files used for work to reconstruct the work week for professionals. They just review and submit. But it's really not just a benefit for the project staff. Because it's easier, their timesheets are more likely to be submitted on time and with higher accuracy for more accurate costing and billing. And that elevates the work of finance, who doesn't have to play timesheet cop. They don't have to chase people to get their timesheets in every period. And that's a huge value add. So And it can also elevate your revenue if you're a service company that bills for your time, allowing you to capture up to $10,000 a year in billable revenue that wouldn't have been captured. Obviously, that changes depending on the size of the firm, but that's some of the initial assessment that we've done, because it can help people actually capture, gather lost time that's otherwise slipping through the cracks. And as far as privacy goes, the user is in complete control of their data at all times. They determine what can be gathered, and their information is never shared with anyone else but themselves. And so this is an example of a supervised machine learning application that exists today in Sage Intacct for our project users. And it's also an example of how we factor privacy and trust into how we design our AI capabilities. Those are really important to us. So next, talking about continuous trust. I love reviewing journal entries, right? Said no one ever. So just like continuous accounting, Sage Intacct is delivering on this vision of continuous trust through a solution called outlier detection for GL. And this AI-powered outlier detection feature makes reviewing journal entries really easy. It looks for patterns in the data and flags transactions that don't fit past patterns. It provides transparency into why the item was flagged, so you don't need to guess. AI helps you gain more trust in your financial data, essentially. So there on screen, you can see it sort of flags what it deems to be an outlier, which would warrant for further review from a professional reviewing these entries. This capability actually exists today in Sage Intacct in our general ledger. And it's actually another example of supervised learning, because it learns from when you reject or accept the entry. And in the future, it will expand to other areas of the product. So really exciting. And then last year, talking about continuous insights, I love spending my weekends preparing for meetings. Said no one ever, right? I can really relate to that one. So, instead of exporting your data to do more complex analysis, such as forecasting, identifying outliers or correlations, you can use the power of AI to do the hard work for you without having to export spreadsheets. So rather than spending your weekend gathering all the data and preparing, this analysis for a presentation on Monday, AI can essentially do this for you. And you can spend more time exploring the data to uncover insights, right? And recommending actions to take. Again, elevating the work of humans to work on more strategic, more value-add activities, as opposed to collating information. And this functionality actually exists today in Sage Intacct's interactive Visual Explorer. In the future, AI may be able to make recommendations of actions to take based on benchmarks and successful things that other companies have done. So there's a lot that we can do in the future with this, and we're really excited to help people actually begin to look forward and forecast and kind of predict what might happen and what actions they might take in the future. All right, so that was a lot of ground to cover. Back to you, Janet.
Thank you. And thanks for showing us how AI can be a powerful tool that can really change the way we work. It's really interesting seeing all of the neat things that are being done kind of to cut out a lot of the manual work that we have to do in the background. But there are also several concerns about AI, and we're going to touch on those and also kind of look at where we see AI moving in the future. And we're going to start with one of the heavy hitting questions. I think there's always a lot of concern around ethics and privacy around AI. And so, David, do you think you could talk to us a little bit about how those concerns are being addressed?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one is, and it should come as no surprise, that AI models tend to embody human biases. And we all know that humans have biases. And the way that happens is essentially that these AI models are trained on historical data, right? And if that historical data has biases in it, then these AI models could also have biases. In fact, they perpetuate them. And we've heard a lot of examples recently about the problems with facial recognition and many other systems, but the consequences of these biases can become critical. So that kind of brings me to the next point, which is how you train your AI models and monitor them to kind of to address these concerns, which are very valid ones. And it really comes with carefully reviewing the data that's used to train the models, using balanced training data, and constantly measuring your models for evidence of bias, right? You can't just train a model and just assume that it's not going to be biased. You really need to be scrutinizing it. But perhaps more importantly, it's important to think about the system as a whole and make sure that it doesn't lead to any ethical issues, and think about what you're trying to predict, not only the data that's fed into the system, but also what you're trying to predict. So for example, suppose you're training a model to predict salaries, right? Not necessarily something we're doing, but if you have training data that has, for example, pay gaps in different groups in your data, and you're trying to predict those salaries, your model might perpetuate those biases and those differences if you're not careful about them and do something about that. Secondly, it's about accountability, and more specifically, we need to make sure that our users and our customers trust our AI models. So a single wrong recommendation could really degrade trust and just cause great harm. And so we need to make sure that we don't introduce poor quality predictions. And we also need to make sure we have proper controls in place, not only on our end, but also for our customers to review the output of those models and to make sure that that they're in line. And then finally, we come to privacy of those users. We need to increase the security of the solution as whole. And there are ongoing initiatives like federated learning, which is a really exciting new area where, in fact, the data from companies and users isn't even required to leave their computers, and we can actually ship the models to the data. So there isn't even a concern of sharing your data, right? Which is a kind of a technical solution to the privacy question, but it's still quite new, and it also is very much a beta thing at these times. But this is just one area where we can bring technology to solve some of the privacy and ethical concerns. So those are just some examples again of some of the ethical considerations. But it's a really important area that we think a lot about and make sure that we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, of course, I can see why that would be super important. And if we change gears a little bit and think about how we see expanding the finance function over the next 5 years, what kind of predictions do you think you have, Eric?
Sure. So first, before jumping into what you can see on the slide here, I want to set the stage a little bit. Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Alphabet, has said that AI will be more transformative to humanity than electricity. That's a pretty bold statement. A PwC study says that AI will contribute $15.7 trillion to global GDP by 2030, right? So we're just a decade away, basically. And those stats aren't hard to come by either. I've found similar studies by Gartner, McKinsey that tell a very similar story. So lots of smart people think that AI will impact the world in a big way in really the not so distant future, right? So I want to kind of set the stage with that to show that AI is really kind of here and going to provide a lot of value, and already is. But to answer your question directly, how do I think AI will impact the finance function over the next 5 years? I see it happening in a few ways here. So first, I think finance teams should expect intelligent solutions that continuously analyze and monitor organizational performance. So, you actually heard about an example from me earlier, the Interactive Visual Explorer, where right now it's a tool to explore data, but in the future, it's likely to become much more intelligent, alerting you of significant changes in potential forecast scenarios. Second, I also talked earlier about anomaly detection or outlier detection. I think in the next 5 years, customers can expect anomaly detection engines to analyze many, if not all, transactions in their system for ones that weren't extra review by a human. It's really important, I think, to have humans review these things, at least while trust is being built in the system. And that will save finance teams a lot of time and increase the accuracy of their financial statements and prevent things like fraud. So that's one other area where I think it will show in finance. A third example is image recognition, OCR. smart matching. So if you think about the sort of like AP process, right? You need to read an invoice oftentimes, figure out what's on that, and code it, or you know, and potentially match it if you're doing a two-way or three-way match in the accounting process. And you know, we already see that, but I think we'll see a lot more of that, where these documents will be read in digitally and sort of understood by machines, again, with a human there to verify that that's correct. But ultimately, that will save a lot of time and increase accuracy. And then a fourth example here is a recommender system. So these are all over Netflix, Amazon. So you've definitely been a consumer of a recommender system. But you know, for example, Sage Intacct could also recommend something, right? Like that, maybe you look at an irregular transaction that's a little related to the outlier detection feature. Or maybe there's a change in expected billings or a contract that's about to renew, right? AI can sort of continuously look at all this data that's in your system and recommend action, right? I think that's when it becomes most important, is when it can recommend meaningful action. And then process automation. So, you know, there are a lot of things that fall into this bucket. You could even say OCR, image recognition, is part of that. Coding and matching could be part of that. RPA could be part of that. Here at Sage, we recently acquired a company called AutoEntry. It's a great solution that I would put under this process automation bucket. It helps with the processing of AP invoices, as I spoke to earlier. So that's a fully automated process actually with AutoEntry. So a lot of customers are really loving that solution. And then another example was when I spoke about earlier, called Sage Intelligent Time, right? Automating the process of filling in a timesheet and making that easier, faster, more accurate. And then finally, last year, but not least, is conversational AI. So, you know, Sandy mentioned it earlier, but with Siri or Alexa, what used to be done by typing into a text box is now done by speaking into a mic, right? So in that case, the graphical UI actually goes away. And so going forward with conversational AI, you can imagine team members at an organization submitting their expenses through a simple conversational interface like a Slack bot or a Microsoft Teams bot. And that concept was actually demoed at the Sage Intacct Advantage user conference. So of course, as these technologies become more commonplace, making sure users trust the AI will be very important, sort of dovetailing off of what David spoke about in terms of ethics. And so in order to do that, you know, data privacy and security, as well as model explainability, which is something we didn't talk about, but basically being able to understand how a model got to, or a machine learning system got to its conclusion, will be really paramount.
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot of really interesting things on the horizon that I think we have to look forward to. So now that we've seen the spectrum of the function of AI and also what it looks like in finance, I kind of want to take a step back and take a little bit of a broader view of how a company like yourself can help prepare to adopt this technology. So for anyone looking to make their investment in AI for their organization's future, what kind of things should they be considering? I want to open this to all of the panelists, but Eric, why don't we start with you?
Yeah. Sure. So what can people do to prepare their business? So, you know, I think, you know, AI is really only as smart as the data that's used to train it. So, you know, kind of implement ways of working that generate and capture data about the business. You know, we come from an old way of thinking that we're constrained by technology storage costs, right? That's high. And so just kind of changing the way of thinking there, and you know, just kind of getting comfortable with collecting the data so that can be used for machine learning. And yeah, I think that's one place where I would start.
David, do you think you could chip in?
Yeah, so I guess on the second bullet I think it's super important to think about principles around data, right? Spoke before about how critical it is, you know, in all of these models, that there might be biases in your data and they could be perpetuated in your models, but more just generally thinking about not only from that perspective, but also in compliance and other regulatory requirements. It's really important to have principles around how you manage your data, and make sure that you're doing the right thing when it comes to AI and machine learning, but just overall, especially even as a data-driven organization. And even the regulatory requirements are constantly changing, and having processes and guidelines to be, reviewing those and making sure that what you're doing there makes sense. As I said before, a lot of this just boils down to the data, so you just have to keep a very close eye on that.
Great. And Sandy, do you have any parting thoughts?
Yeah, as I said before, AI is really for everyone. I would recommend that organizations begin preparing and experimenting. So you don't need to be an expert, but you need to understand and trust the results of AI and make sure that they're real. So take advantage of the solutions that you're using today that already have AI embedded, if you have them. Try them out. It's good for you to understand what the options are in your existing solutions or new solutions that you acquire and how they'll help you become more productive. You can use some of the things you've learned today and apply them when evaluating new solutions, such as looking for cloud solutions that provide data and resources for AI to use. Looking at how the privacy and the transparency are being incorporated into those solutions. And of course, the value that AI delivers, and how it can free you to add more human value to your business.
Great. And that wraps up our presentation portion, actually. But we do have some time for a couple questions for our Q&A portion. So let's jump in. And really, I'm just going to open this to the floor for any of our presenters or panelists to take on. So the first question is this: when do you think AI will be able to make decisions for us? And anyone can jump in to answer this.
Yeah, I guess I could chime in there and say, I think there are certain types of decisions that AI is already making for us. And I think that kind of goes into the category that Eric was talking about, RPA and these processes and things that kind of, machines are actually quite good at doing already. But then there's a different set of problems and things where, they may never make the decisions, but they help humans have all the information and recommendations to be able to make the decisions themselves, review that information, and then make those decisions. So, like Eric was saying, being able to elevate the human of works, the work of humans, kind of in line with Aaron Harris's statement at the beginning.
Yeah, and the next question kind of ties into that, actually. And how do you all think that AI has affected Sage Intacct's overall strategy?
I can take this one. I think it makes the strategy possible. We've created this, pretty provocative view of the future that we can eliminate the financial close and create continuous assurance and continuous insights. The only way that's possible is with AI. So what started off as something that's quite provocative and ambitious, and really, something more directional, more than achievable in the short term. Now we believe we have the technology available to achieve our ambitions and to innovate along those storylines that we've spoken about today.
Great. And I think we have time for one more. So as our final question for the day, what do you all think is the best way to measure the ROI or the return on investment for AI?
Sure, I can take a stab at this one too. I think we should be careful to not look at AI as the destination and not look at AI as the solution. AI is a tool that's available to us to create solutions. And so in that regard, I'm not sure why we would measure the ROI of AI powered technology any differently than we would measure ROI of legacy technology. We just believe that it now unlocks the ability to solve problems that prior to AI were not possible or were prohibitively expensive.
Yeah, and I think I'll also just add, I think there's certain areas where we can measure, very precisely the ROI. So, let's say you're able to get a better, it predicts better interest rates and loan types for you to manage your cash, right? And you can just measure, oh, look, I'm paying less in interest because of these recommendations. That's a pretty easy way to measure things. Or, if your timekeeping solution allows you to capture more of your billable time, you can say, okay, I've captured the X more hours and here's my billable rate, and that's how much more you've made. But I think more often than not, it's going to be a fuzzier a picture where it's not as easy to measure the ROI.
Great, thank you everyone. That wraps up all the time we have for today. I want to thank all of our presenters for being with us and sharing a little bit of their expertise. And I also want to thank all of you who've tuned into this webinar today. And before we wrap up, I just wanted to leave everyone with some parting words from Ginny Rometty, who is the former chairman and CEO of IBM and current co-chairman at 110. Some people call this artificial intelligence, but the reality is that this technology will enhance us. So instead of artificial intelligence, I think we'll augment our intelligence. And finally, if you're interested in learning more, we offer a number of resources all on our website. You can activate a free trial so you can get a hands-on experience of Sage Intacct, or sign up for a variety of upcoming webinars. You can also follow us on Twitter, connect with us on Facebook, or call us directly at that number here. Thank you so much for joining us today.